Browns brass talks Deshaun Watson, quarterback, the draft, plus what's left for the Browns in free agency now on the React. Welcome to the OBR streaming network. My name is Brad Ward. The man next to me is the always incredible Pete Smith. This is the React. We will be talking about the owners' meetings. Lots of stuff to be said from Jimmy Haslam, Andrew Berry, and Kevin Stefanski. Mainly, Jimmy was probably the most interesting, had lots to say about the direction of the organization and whatnot. So we'll kind of hit that up. We've got some reaction to that as well. What's going on, Pete?
It's always nice to hear the Browns say stuff that we've been reporting for months.
Yes. For instance?
Well, the Deshaun Watson thing, I had the moment he hit the ground, but that element was definitely up there. But some of the other stuff in terms of just how they view the draft, subscribers would be, I don't think much of what was said is a huge surprise to anyone who's been following our coverage and seemingly where at least the second pick of the draft is going.
Yeah, I think that was pretty clear. We're also coming up here just about 3 weeks or so from the draft in itself. Lots to do there. We're going to discuss kind of where the Browns are at. If you think free agency, let's just start there before we dive into Jimmy's words. What is left on the Browns free agency checklist that you would assume them to maybe make any more moves before the draft?
I think the draft part of this is probably incidental, but obviously they have to get quarterback, safety, potentially tight end, wide receiver. Those are all things that need to get addressed. The timeline on those relative to the draft is, I think, not all that important. For example, there's some safeties out there that want money, and they're being patient. And I think that's going to wait until after the draft. And I think in that scenario, their patience is going to be rewarded because I don't think there are a ton of answers at the safety position in this draft. I think those guys will eventually get paid, whereas free agent running backs, wide receivers, I think are in a much higher stakes situation where teams may well find answers in the draft and their bargaining power is going to go down. Quarterbacks are, in that respect, I think quarterback demand is going to stay, stay steady the whole way. The Browns need a quarterback regardless of what they do in the draft. That part's not going to change. It's just a question of which direction do they want to go, who's the fit for them, and then price tag and all those other things.
Okay. That sounds about right. I had safety down, quarterback, obviously, maybe tight end. I don't know. Maybe the trade market, something to keep an eye on. But other than that, that's what I had for free agency. All right, let's talk about what Jimmy had to say. Of course, we all know we'll start the show here with his main statement, which, you have talked about for some time, that the team will need to at some point come out and admit that this is a fail. And we got that from Jimmy Haslam at the owners' meetings. Yeah. And we're going to take a quick peek at Florio and his reaction to all of this as they discuss the Browns and what happened here.
He finally did it. Jimmy Haslam, Browns owner, finally admitted
Amazing.
that they made a mistake.
Yeah.
With Deshaun Watson 3 years ago. I don't know that you come out and admit it, though, while the guy's still on the team. I mean, you admit it by benching him. You admit it by not playing him. To come out and say what he said, and he said this, we took a big swing and a miss with Deshaun. We thought we had the quarterback. We didn't, and we gave up a lot of draft picks to get him and a lot of money. So we've got to dig ourselves out of that hole. It was an entire organization decision, and it ends with D and I, so hold us accountable. Now look, okay, I accept your offer, Jimmy Haslam, to hold you accountable. How do you hold an owner accountable? There is no way to hold an owner of a team accountable. What can you do? What can you do? Make him sell the team? The fans are not going to deny themselves. They say this all the time. You're not going to deprive yourself the thing you love. You're not.
I think what he's saying is like in the press, right? And just the narrative around the deal. He does say it's an organizational decision. We know that this idea was not, birthed by Jimmy Haslam. He's kind of stepping in front of, the bullet for everybody here. Doesn't it feel like that to you, P?
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Haslam certainly involved, unquestionably. Obviously had to sign off on making the full guarantee offer. May have been the reason they made the full guarantee offer. We don't know for sure, but ultimately had to sign off on the whole thing. I think more than anything, he's trying to lower the temperature on the organization as a whole. It sort of dovetails with a lot of his messaging, talking about the draft and saying along the lines of we're not going to force a Pickett, force a quarterback pick at 2, to then say I'm taking all the ownership. I think that is deliberately trying to lower the temperature on the perceived pressure on Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry to sort of crush it this year, or the belief that they have to draft a quarterback at 2 because they need to chase wins. Now, having said that, one, Jimmy Haslam could wake up in 3 weeks and decide, no, we're doing this at 2. Or he could, in 10 months from now, if the Browns are struggling or the development isn't there, come up and decide they're not safe and decide to clean house. But at least for the moment, he seems to have what I would a clear-eyed, sober view of the situation. And looking at the draft, honestly, which is to say that the quarterback is clearly a huge need for the team. But just because you take it at 2 doesn't mean it's going to be worth the second pick in the draft. So giving Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski the green light not to have to make that pick, they may not have felt that pressure anyway, but you're doing it publicly to send that message to everybody else that's trying to make the Browns feel this pressure they have to do a certain thing is important. And because if they were to take either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter at 2, and then they find their way to whether it's Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe at the back end of the first round or 33rd pick, and they do get one of those guys, there's an element that they can sell that as a big win. Now, obviously, that quarterback would still have to develop, still have to be good, but still this feeling of, so many people demanding you get this guy at 2, and then ultimately potentially still getting the guy in Sanders in that scenario, or somebody of comparable talent while also getting what you believe is not even you believe, what the consensus seems to be a superstar talent with the second pick of the draft.
Yeah. I don't think we've been saying that, you don't force it at 2 all along. It's fine that he said that. We'll talk about some other things he said in regards to the draft where I do have some questions, and just, as far as moving forward. But let's get through this first here.
Going to stop going to the games. You're not going to stop watching the games. You love the Cleveland Browns, and you accept them warts and all. There is no way to hold an owner accountable. You hold a GM accountable by firing him, a coach accountable by firing him, a player accountable by getting rid of him. There's no way to hold an owner accountable. So it's just words.
I hear you. They're words to a degree, but I give them credit. I mean, there's been other owners that have had bad contracts, made bad decisions. They didn't own it like that. I'll give them credit for that. I really will.
But it's beyond the point of obvious. Everybody knows at this
I get
point.
it. But at least he addresses it, right? We get it out of the way. It's kind of the elephant in the room. He's got to deal with it. And, yeah, I understand. It's hard to make an owner accountable. But I think with us talking, the fact that we've kind of just belittled the decision to sign him and everything that went into it already, that's how you put pressure on him. And, of course, talk radio in Cleveland talking to, Jimmy Haslam, we can't listen to him anymore. That's how he's going to be accountable. And I think there is value in that. The one thing is they're all rich, all these owners, they're all here, they own football teams, they got that. But there is a little competition between all of them to be like, my team and how I do things is better, right? And he's got a bad stain on his coat right now with the Deshaun Watson thing. And it looks bad. And I think he's speaking in a way where it's just like, yeah, we know it's over, but it's like sounds like it's really over when you kind of say those type of things.
I think he's got more stains on his coat than there are names on that jersey, that never-ending jersey of the starting quarterbacks ever since the Browns re-entered the league in 1999. He's been the owner since 2012, and it hasn't been good. It's just so weird to see guys who were minority owners of the Steelers who leave to become primary owners of their own teams. Jimmy Haslam, David Tepper. Now, Josh Harris was part of that too. So far, so good for Josh Harris. But it's like, did they learn nothing? We've joked about that before. Does Art Rooney, lie to them about how to run a team? Does he deliberately give them bad information because he knows he's going to be competing with them one of these days? Or
he takes such a back seat that they've seen that and they go, no, I want to be more involved. And that's what it feels like.
I think Art quietly, is low-key involved.
Yes.
He doesn't need anyone to know he's involved.
Right.
He's almost like trying to hide that he's involved. But that's just the way he is. He's very quiet. He's very reserved. He stays in the background, but he's very involved in his team. It's been obvious that Jimmy Haslam is front and center and involved in the Browns. And he can call it an organizational decision, but when the owner wants it, the owner gets it. That's one of the things that fascinates me about this process. You invest all the money into the organization, the layers and levels of expertise, and at the end of the day, everybody is on pins and needles watching and waiting to see what the owner wants. All
right, so this is where Florio kind of gets out of line here. This isn't really how this played out. He's off track here. Don't you think, Pete? This is not, once again, I think the idea of Watson was not generated by Haslam. He did not come down and command they go get Deshaun Watson. I don't think that's how this thing played out at all, and that's how he's making it out to be.
No, but because of how it's turned out, it allows people like Florio to write the story that they want to write in terms of how it went. But no, this was an idea that was initially brought up by Berry and Stefanski because it was an option to sit there and say this quarterback comes available. Obviously, 13 teams pursued it. 4 ended up in the final bidding, and the Browns ultimately won, if that's how you want to phrase it, in how they proceeded. And obviously the fact that they were willing to guarantee all that money, the draft picks are bad enough. But if they hadn't guaranteed the whole contract and Deshaun took it, they'd be out of this thing. But that is still lingering because of that. Now, obviously, if they didn't guarantee the whole thing, you wouldn't be here. And ultimately, that whole thing would have been dodged. And that may be the part where Jimmy Haslam's really taking the blame on this, is that if he got sort of ultimately too competitive in that scenario and then said, no, we'll guarantee the whole thing and we're going to push it, then there's this part of, even if Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry wanted this to happen initially and made their best bet. I mean, Kevin Stefanski went to Houston to recruit him. They had meetings and all this stuff, but they can at least say at the end of the day, listen, if we had just stuck with our initial bid and lost, we don't get Watson, but we aren't stuck with all the rest of this. And, Haslam ultimately has to own it. Now, the Jimmy Haslam, to Florio's point, has had an awful tenure as owner of this team. I will give him credit. In the past couple of months, he's done a few things right. Yeah. I think he handled the Myles Garrett thing beautifully.
Yep.
And I think people who criticized him were proven wrong almost immediately. Myles Garrett, one of the many failed leverage plays by his agency and team, however you want to describe it, was trying to embarrass the Browns by saying that by having Tom Pelissero report that Jimmy Haslam was unwilling to meet Myles Garrett. And within minutes, Mary Kay Cabot comes out with a report saying Jimmy Haslam has basically said, talk to Andrew Berry. He's the GM, all this other stuff. And there were all these people who were coming out going, Jimmy Haslam's an idiot for not meeting with his best player, not being willing to. He's too good to talk to his best player, all this other crap. And what he did is he empowered his GM to be the GM. He avoided the NBA scenario, which is now you get into a situation where you sort of ignore the owner or the GM as a real factor, and you go straight to the owner, which minimizes Andrew Berry's role on the team. And you put yourself in a position where now the owner is negotiating. And Jimmy Haslam in this scenario recognized, one, this is why I hired Andrew Berry. I'm not good at this. My track record proves it. And then I'm going to back my guy.
Yeah.
He does it. The contract's done almost immediately. This is immediately hailed as by both local and national reporters that, well, the Browns just threw money at it, that this was Jimmy's way of sort of getting out of it. And then within days of that, Jamar Chase gets an even bigger contract.
Yeah.
And then now we're going to hear, and given the way Jerry Jones is absolutely mangling this negotiation with Micah Parsons as entirely predictable, he's going to end up paying even more money. The TJ Watt contract's still not done. That could end up costing them, I suspect will cost them more money than they were anticipating. So the Browns get Myles Garrett back relatively painlessly from an organizational standpoint. Whatever you want to say about Myles Garrett and the true reality of why he would want out and everything else, the Browns handled it correctly, professionally, minimized the damage, and got the contract done. And then to further give Jimmy Haslam credit, in terms of this whole element with the Deshaun Watson part, which I'll get back to in a second. But he also came out with a quote about Myles Garrett, basically saying, like, I totally get why Myles Garrett was frustrated. We're all frustrated. We weren't good, all this other stuff. And like in that moment, I was like, this was a really good quote from Jimmy Haslam, because he completely covers for Myles Garrett in a way that Myles Garrett, whether he's ever going to acknowledge it publicly or not, probably really appreciates, because he gave him a whole lot of cover. And it's, again, knowing some of the things behind the scenes, like Jimmy Haslam did him a huge solid in this moment. So that's another area where I think Jimmy Haslam has done well. And then the other part with this whole Deshaun Watson part is we were starting to hear from idiots, I'll just say it, idiots, that were taking the idea seriously Deshaun Watson was a thing. Again, you saw him absolutely suck. You saw him crumple to the ground. You then find out he re-injures the Achilles. He's out for God only knows how long. And then you had people start to ask the question, well, maybe he's going to be a thing again. This ends it. Not a thing, which I think is important, as stupid as it is, because any person who thought about this for 30 seconds completely understood Deshaun Watson was never going to be on the field again for the Cleveland Browns. Under no circumstances. They could not. They'd put me out there before they put Deshaun Watson on the field at this point, because it's just not worth the PR hit. And how deflating would it be for the organization to put him on the field? Like, you could just feel the energy. Again, the world's biggest energy vampire just sucked the life out of this team when he was there. To do it again, you could just feel the stadium empty out as it's happening. Like, stop it. Like, it was this idea floated. Oh, maybe in a road game. Stop it. Stop it. You're not this stupid. It was never going to happen. So in that part, it was a little bit of a reassurance to fans that this was not going to happen, because look, there is this, Cleveland Browns fans and Cleveland fans in general are by nature psychotic and very always worried about the other shoe dropping, that something bad is going to happen, even when it's good. Like, even with the Cavs thing, even as good as the Cavs are, there are people sitting there, oh God, something bad's going to happen, because this is just how it always works for Cleveland fans or the Guardians or anything else, that there's always this fear of something else. Even so, Deshaun Watson could be dead in the ground, and there will still be somebody worried that he's going to be coming back and playing quarterback for this team. So I do think that part has value to that, even though, again, it's addressing a point that was never needed to be made. But the fact that Jimmy said it is also important. It's not Andrew Berry saying it. It's not Kevin Stefanski saying it, because if you've listened to them cover, even at the league meetings, even at the same place, they were asked. Both of them were asked about this, and both of them sort of were very, as they are always going to be. We're always professional. We're always sort of like sidestepping it away by saying, listen, all we want him to do is focus on his rehab and focus on being on his health. Because
he needs to get better.
Questions like at the end of the season, Mary Kay Cabot or whoever, I know it was her asking, is there some serious thought that Deshaun Watson's going to go back and be the starter next year? And they're just, listen, we just want him to focus on his health. We want him to, just focus on the rehab. Just focus on the rehab, because the answer is, of course, not. But Jimmy Haslam doing that gives them cover, because there is this small element, and why Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry were always going to be super professional with this. One, they've got a relationship with David Mugoleta, who Jerry Jones just pissed off. That it's going to extend beyond this. They've got other clients of his.
Yeah.
They don't want to come up with a reason to antagonize a person who's actively in the building rehabbing now, because he went and stupidly hurt himself again. So now he has to be in the building to do this. My preference would be he's rehabbing on the moon, but it is what it is. Yeah. So if Berry and Stefanski are the ones saying this, then there's this potentially weird, awkward dynamic. Jimmy Haslam's not going to be dealing with Deshaun all that much. And it sort of, gives them cover to be like, we can still be professional with Deshaun. We can do, keep it professional, keep it sort of courteous in the building. And then, if Deshaun's ever like, what about and whatever else, then they listen, man, this is the owner's call. We can, our hands are tied.
Yeah.
I do think there's a small value in that, even though, look, there's a world where Deshaun could be a pain. I suspect I suspect there's a little bit of an understanding that if Deshaun decides to be a pain in the butt, that the Browns can be a much larger pain in Deshaun's butt on this whole thing. And at this point, I think Deshaun is just trying to get out with with his giant Brinks truck of money he's gotten, and just trying to get out here without any further damage to himself at this point. So I think there's enough incentive for him to be a good citizen for the next calendar year before they can, fire him out of a cannon.
Yes, agreed. And I'm glad Jimmy said it. It probably makes for some awkward moments with him in the building and whatnot, but so be it, right?
230 million reasons why Jimmy Haslam would be very upset about this situation. Just
draw
gone.
The line. Draw the line in the sand. You're watching the React on the OBR streaming network. Sorry about that. So I wanted to go over some other of Haslam's quotes here, because he had some very interesting things to say, Pete. Probably, I don't know. We'll go through them. So he started out, this is not this doesn't include the one quote you were talking about where he did say that about Miles, but it's him talking about quarterback. If you had the number one pick, you could say, okay, we know what we're going to do, Haslam told a small group of Browns beat writers at the NFL annual meeting at the Breakers. When you're at number 2, you don't control your own destiny. I think Andrew told you all last night he did not see us trading up, so it would be great if we could get the quarterback, but we're not going to force it. We're going to be patient. We're going to try to accumulate as many really good football players as we can.
That is the green light. Do not take a quarterback.
Well, yes, I think it sounds like that too. not forcing it. Sounds like, you don't have to take a quarterback here. We'll get to some more of this later here, though. He goes on. The Browns will fly to Colorado on Thursday for these are the questions, I believe. Some of the questions, sort of paraphrase. The school's NFL showcase featuring Sanders and Travis Hunter, who plays both ways full-time as a receiver / cornerback. They'll take Sanders to dinner to get to know him better, but won't draft him if he's not a fit. So far, it's all been positive, but they'll let the process play out. Here is back to Haslam, quote, "I think the message is if the right person's there, we're going to take him," Haslam said. "If not, we'll figure out for a year or two until we get the right person. And I just keep saying we need good football players. They are good. There are good football players in this draft, and we've got to make sure we get the right ones for us." A year or two, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, in 10 months, if the Kenny Pickett dream is not working out the way they hope, this could take on a whole different complexion where we're talking about they're 3-10 or something, and the pressure's on and they can make a change. But I think I think this is a clear-eyed, sober look at what it takes to win in the NFL. I think Jimmy Haslam, I'm going to guess that Jimmy Haslam watched the Super Bowl. I'm going to throw it out there that he watched it. And he saw the Philadelphia Eagles, who, yes, have a quarterback that's pretty good, but had a team loaded with talent. And had to look at that and be like, yeah, the quarterback's going to help a whole lot, but you need a whole lot of really good football players if you're going to win consistently. And if the quarterback isn't there at 2, which every indication is it's not, then you got to take something else. So build the rest of your team. They can still go up and get a quarterback potentially later in the draft, which is why it's still worthwhile to talk to Shedeur Sanders, because it's very possible that he could be available later in the first round and the Browns could go up and get him, and everybody will hail it as some achievement. They've also obviously talked to Jackson Dart. They have done research on a ton of research on Jalen Milroe. They've got a number of options that they could go with. And based on that lowered investment, if they do that, it's not going to preclude them if they're in a situation where they can go up and get a quarterback they absolutely love in the future. But it gives them a lot of options, which is what Andrew Berry's all about. And this Browns organization is all about. They love having options. Hey, if this quarterback develops and we get what we want, great. Like Jalen Milroe is the easiest way to sort of look at it through this lens. I don't think Jalen Milroe is going to be ready in a year. So if you were to take him at 33, for example, and you're starting to develop him, I think it's going to take him 2 years. You could still use him for things, but I think he's 2 years away from being a full-time starter. So just by nature, that's not going to meet up with your schedule of next year. So that would mean that you are still looking at the quarterback position. Ultimately, you're taking what you hope are 2 great swings at the position. And at least one of them works out. In perfect world, both of them work out. You can potentially trade one and get some of that draft capital back to then build around the one that did work. But this is the situation they find themselves, unfortunately. They didn't time this up to be in the perfect spot where they had the second pick in last year's draft. But they have to play the board as it is, not as they want it to be. And thankfully, Jimmy is saying this because then it gives them sort of permission to play it how they want to play it. And again, he could change his mind, but at least for the time being, the nightmare scenario, if you are a fan of a team, is that your team operates as if the people running it are afraid of getting fired. Because look at the New York Jets from last year, where they're trading stupid picks for players that make no sense. Trading what amounted to be a 3rd-round pick for Devontae Adams to then cut him was a complete waste of their time. Trading another draft pick to get a edge rusher and Hassan Reddick, who I don't know if he ever played it down for them, was stupid. And then they fired those front office personnel. The worst thing in the world would be the Browns act as if they are worried about losing their job, take a quarterback they don't believe in, and do other things they don't believe in to then supplement that quarterback to try to make this thing go, eke out sort of a winning season for 1 year that basically Butch Davis's 9-7 year, and then you go back to crap and you actually gain nothing because none of it was sustainable.
I agreed, and I want them to do this, but there's a theme here in his quotes that will continue to come up, that there's no lack of urgency at all.
I don't think there's a lack of urgency. I think
there is a lack of urgency.
Everything to me is, how do you look at the draft? The draft to me is your best opportunity. I'll use Andrew Berry language. Out of the player procurement period, the draft is your best place to acquire talent. And you want to maximize that as much as you can. Andrew Berry talks about, even though I think his metaphor sort of misses the mark for me, I understand what he's trying to say by saying, I view it as an expansion team every year. Because that allows him to then just acquire as much talent as he thinks he can. And, that's ultimately his best theory of the case in terms of how to acquire talent. And the past 2 years, that has had the best results for him relative to the draft since the Greg Newsome JOK year. So in that sense, I'm fine with him. I don't want to qualify best player available with a bunch of BS that doesn't make any sense, because that's what I keep running into. Well, the Browns should take the best player available, but they really need a quarterback. So they should throw best player available out the window. The Browns need to, not you necessarily, just people in general. The Browns need to take the best player available, but it doesn't help the offense, so they should throw that out. Like, either you believe in something or you don't. And yes, there are certain things you can sort of tweak it in this particular case, which like in this scenario, if you're saying like, look, I think Abdul Carter's a great player, but I like Travis Hunter a little bit more, and he can help you on offense, whereas the defense is better. Fine, but ultimately, if you're telling me Abdul Carter is the better player, you should take Abdul Carter because he won. In addition to the fact he plays a more premium position. So the idea that there's no urgency to me, I disagree with, because I want them to operate on their base philosophy, and their base philosophy includes prioritizing the quarterback position. They've done everything leading up to the draft that I would want them to do relative to the quarterback position, but they have to play the board as it is. So they've talked to Cam Ward. They went to a private workout with a guy they will never get, just to be sure. They are going to talk to Shooter Sanders. They've done everything with Jackson Dart. They've done everything with Jalen Milroe.
That's what every team would do when you have the second pick. That's just doing your due diligence. That doesn't. They don't get patted on the back for doing their job.
But to say that is not a sense of urgency is ignoring.
No, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about here. This sounds to me like they have a free pass for the next 2 years to just find a quarterback whenever they want.
I don't view it that way, because I think Jimmy Haslam is just being honest to what it is. Because if they're not going to do that, then why even look at quarterbacks this year? Everybody's going to say this isn't a great quarterback class, but should they just punt it? That would be, to me, the no sense of urgency.
They are punting it.
How are they punting it if they take a guy in the first round?
I haven't seen that yet, A. And B, they have Kenny Pickett right now. And and they talk about him being their starter.
No, that's not what they've said. And this is the part. Cleveland media has misrepresented what has been said. They've said in the scenario where Kenny Pickett is the starter, they'd be comfortable with that situation. I'm not saying we're going with Kenny Pickett.
Okay, well, I'm not comfortable with that situation.
I'm not either. But that's, again, to say that's no sense of urgency is crap.
It's crap. Okay. We'll figure it out for a year or two until we get the right person. That doesn't sound like urgency to me.
I want the right person. I don't want just anyone.
I don't want just anyone either, but I mean, you've got to, it's mixed messaging from what they said before, that they weren't going to punt. They weren't going to try to, it feel like they're like half in, half out. Like it's just
what is the path of urgency here?
the path of urgency is trying to win, and so far they have shown
So they're not trying to win.
It doesn't feel like it.
So again, what is the path to urgency? Is it would it have been overpaying for Daniel Jones? Is that urgency, or
it would be having anybody else besides Kenny Pickett be your sole quarterback in your quarterback room right now, and then saying, while that is the thing, saying we're good for the next year or two until we run into the guy we like. That is not urgency. That is not telling me that they're trying to win right now.
If you asked me, how do you feel about Kenny Pickett? If I'm the Browns, what do you want them to say? Well, Kenny Pickett, we got him for a pick, but he sucks. We don't think of him as an option at all. And frankly, I wish we, if I'm Kevin Stefanski, and I think Andrew Berry should just cut him. Like, of course he's going to say, if he's on the field, we feel comfortable. He said this about PJ Walker. He says this about anyone who's taking quarterback snaps for this team. That's his job. He's going to project strength. What I want, if you're telling me that they have no urgency, what was the path forward to get urgency? Because it sounds to me like just anyone would have been urgency as opposed to getting a meaningful answer. Like, to me, Kirk Cousins does not make me feel more urgent. It just feels like a Band-Aid, because all of these guys feel like Band-Aids.
No, they are. What your job was to acquire a bridge. Then if this is your plan, then acquire a bridge quarterback this offseason.
Is this offseason over?
Doesn't it feel less and less like Kirk Cousins is an option?
At this point, to me, it does, but ultimately we're going to get through the draft. And if they come back and trade for Kirk Cousins, are we going to suddenly feel great about this team? No.
Yeah,
If they sign Joe Flacco, are we going to suddenly feel great about this team? No. That's the point.
Feel better. I'll feel better.
I don't know how much. I mean, is it better than Kenny Pickett?
So once again,
without
then you're just conceding to the idea that if it doesn't make you feel that much better than Kenny Pickett, then we're just conceding to the idea that they're just going to have a not very good quarterback this year.
Okay, so let me use the Steelers as an example. The Steelers were a playoff team last year. They don't have a quarterback. Mason Rudolph is their quarterback. Are they not showing enough urgency because they haven't signed Aaron Rodgers yet?
They're gonna sign Aaron Rodgers,
but they haven't. Like, because everybody else, even though you and I don't necessarily believe it, what is everybody saying around Kirk Cousins? Well, eventually the Browns are going to trade for him, so you can use the same argument for that. I mean, that's my point. Is ultimately
okay,
but
right.
Like,
if they get him, that's fair.
Let's put it this way: if you're the Steelers, and you're a Steelers fan, which I know you enjoy. You go into this season, let's say they don't draft a quarterback, or they draft Jalen Milroe, who's not really a factor for this year, and they sign Aaron Rodgers. After they went to the playoffs and they made this big stink about how they were going to change things and be better and all this, do you take the Steelers seriously as a team with Aaron Rodgers leading the way?
I mean, sort of.
Or let's put Kirk Cousins on the Steelers. Are they a serious team at that point?
More serious than they are now.
I would say I would say for this year, short of something entirely unexpected happening, the Steelers are an unserious franchise this year.
Dude,
despite the fact they may well make the playoffs.
You can say what you want about Aaron Rodgers, and he's a fruitcake and everything, but he was still playing good football at the end of last season.
I look forward to Abdul Carter and Myles Garrett ending his life.
I would love that. But I'm just saying, like, I mean, we're acting like he was like terrible last year. He was 28-11 as a starting quarterback last year.
28-11.
28 touchdown passes, 11 interceptions. That's not.
Okay. For a second, it sounded like that was the record. It was like,
no. with a passer rating of 90.53. That's the starting caliber quarterback in the NFL, whether he's middling and whatever. I'm just saying, yeah, Jerry, it's fine, man. I get it. You don't want me to want a better quarterback, and that's fine.
I have no problem with the idea that you want a better quarterback. What I'm saying is I don't agree with the element of urgency, because
okay.
The sense of urgency argument to me is there was this really great option and the Browns didn't pursue him. And I don't think you think Daniel Jones was a great option. I don't think you think Justin Fields was a great option. I don't think you thought Mac Jones was a great option.
I think they're better options than what we have now.
But are they good options, or are they just better than what we have?
They're better than what we have. And at least I would feel like they would have a chance to put together some sort of a winning thing. And maybe they don't, but I would at least feel like they were trying, instead what they did with Kenny Pickett took no effort. It took no resources. It took nothing.
It took resources. They gave a freaking 5th round pick that I'm still upset about.
You know what I mean. They didn't have to pay any money to get him. They didn't have to, which is why they did it. And I just want a competent quarterback to give them a chance to win.
Well, Kenny Pickett has a winning record.
Okay. All right.
So this is the thing.
We're going to start defending Kenny now.
No, I don't.
Crazy.
That's the thing. I don't think it's a serious option. I don't think any of these guys are serious. I think, and I've said this all along, I look at this and I say I'm focused on everything else because I know what the quarterback position is going to be. I hope it overachieves. I hope you get the Joe Flacco resurgence to whoever it is at quarterback. But being realistic, I'm operating in a division with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. I'm at a huge disadvantage. So I'm not going to try to sell, I want somebody who can win football games. Yeah, that'd be great. But I have to be honest, because I can't say that Kirk Cousins is going to put me on the same level as two of the other teams in this division. And that is ultimately where you're at. You are now, we're now talking about the difference between 4th place and 3rd place. That to me isn't serious. Now, do I think the Browns can get to 500 or something with that level of play? Yeah, potentially, if they do the other things we talked about, play good defense, running game, and significantly better special teams. Yeah, that part's fine. But that's where I disagree with on the notion of no sense of urgency. I think they've had a sense of urgency. It's just these are the options that are there and they suck, which is why Sam Darnold and Sam Darnold, even looking at him, he got this allegedly $100 million contract from Seattle. It is an out after year 1. That's how seriously everybody took this free agent class. It's just not very good.
Okay, but remember what you said at the beginning of going into this. What did you want for this quarterback room? You wanted Daniel
veteran. I do still.
You wanted Daniel Jones and somebody else, right?
My dream scenario was Daniel Jones and Kirk Cousins. Yes. And we've got neither. And it's unfortunate, but again, I always looked at this as trying to get to basically 9 wins. And even as I said, I wanted Daniel Jones and Kirk Cousins. It was, you've got to be able to run the ball in a way they haven't done since Nick Chubb initially got hurt. You've got to play really good defense.
We totally agree on that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is so I think more than anything, more than anything, it's just the timeline that is frustrating. As I'm sure the timeline for the Steelers is incredibly frustrating to the point where they probably are ready to strangle Aaron Rodgers. The fact that they're still dealing with this crap, even if you believe it's ultimately going to get done, in the same way you and I might think that something will ultimately get done, until it happens, it hasn't happened.
So here's my main source of frustration, and then I'll get off of it and we'll get back to this. The messaging was they were 3-14, and it was a fluke it was a shit year, and it was a fluke. And they were just a couple players away from flipping it right around. There was no reason to rebuild. They weren't going to rebuild. They weren't going to do that. But they are kind of doing that now, we're saying we don't need to take a quarterback to try to be competitive this year. We don't want to force it there, and I don't want them to force it too. But you get my point. They haven't done anything else. You know what I mean? Outside of Kenny Pickett, like now and now, you've got Haslam saying, "Oh, we'll figure it out in the next year or two." These guys are pretty much safe, is what I read through this, and we don't want them to feel like they have to take a quarterback. Well, I mean, come on, man. What are we doing then? What are we doing then?
I don't want Jimmy Haslam handing out edicts at this point. I just want him to say, I trust my guys. I'm going to let them do what they do. And then ultimately, I'm going to judge them on that. That's what I want from Jimmy Haslam. I don't want him saying the Browns need to do this, because then we are going to hold them to that standard. And ultimately, it's probably going to end in a place we don't want it to go. So I'd rather he be open-minded, and at least that sends the message that he's in on the plan, which I'm fine with. Ultimately, what I want and what I hear from Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry is we want to win football games. We want to do everything we can to get this team right and everything else. At this point, the word rebuild has lost all meaning to me, because the Browns aren't hemorrhaging talent. They aren't doing – the 49ers are in more of a rebuild than the Browns are. They have let go all kinds of players and yet still trying to compete. So either at some point this is just roster churn because they still have expectations to be competitive, everything, or in the case of the Browns, they are holding what they have and just trying to add to it. Whatever you think that is, you can say, well, I don't think they're going to be good. I think they're going to be a fourth place team. I don't think they're going to make playoffs. But that does not constitute a rebuild to me. Rebuild to me would have been doing the thing so many people wanted to do, trade Myles Garrett and tear down the roster. They are not doing that. The closest thing we've seen to that was releasing Dalvin Tomlinson, and then they replaced him with Malik Collins. Like, that does not constitute a rebuild to me. It's just we are playing it as it lies and seeing where it goes, but we want to keep adding to what we have. Now, to your point about the whole 3-14 thing, and sort of playing it off as sort of a fluke, I think that is a more difficult position to defend by the day. I think as we keep going through this, I think that is becoming increasingly unrealistic, unless one, they've got, whether it's the draft or after the draft, and there's a whole bunch of players that are going to be coming, and they may, that either we're going to be reading, we're either going to be talking about in September, oh man, either Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter is crushing it, and we've got this third round pick who's coming and made a really big impact, and oh man, this late round running back we got is already making an impact. Like, that's probably not realistic. The guy they pick at 2 needs to be good or helpful in some way. But if they pick a quarterback with that second pick, whether it's 33 or in the first round, they're probably not. And then, after that, you get into depth picks, and hopefully one of those guys can give you contributions in the way that you obviously waited until the end of the year. But you would love to get a Jawan Briggs type contribution from somebody else and with one of those late round picks. But ultimately, it's going to be whatever, the things we talked about already. They need to find a safety. That guy needs to be able to come in and be able to help them. They need to get a tight end that's going to be able to come in and contribute in some form or fashion. They need to be able to get another receiver, whether that's Elijah Moore or somebody else, somebody who can come in and at least provide them what they were getting from them last year. But like, if we get to July and they've done those things, we will feel potentially better. But I'm probably not going to be sitting here going, man, this is a playoff team. And to that point of it's a fluke year, in some ways, yes, Deshaun Watson was that bad. The quarterback play was that bad. The running game was that bad. The kicking game was that bad. I think they can really address 2 of those things pretty quickly. If Justin Hopkins just remembers that the ball goes through the uprights as opposed to the outside of them, we're going to be in better shape. And then I am desperately hoping that the hire of Mike Bloomgren is going to be a big boon, plus the combination of Tommy Rees and Kevin Stefanski getting the offense back in a way that's more in line with the talents and hopefully keeps the offensive line happy and healthy. so that they can do those things, take pressure off whoever's the quarterback, and be a more competent franchise. If they just do those things, they're going to be better. But that's still not guaranteeing them being a team that is going to matter in December. And again, to that point, I do think that is becoming a more and more tenuous position to hold. Maybe the draft and more free agency will change that, but I doubt it.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough to swallow, right? Like, yeah.
I mean, anytime we're talking about going into a season being like, well, it's not this year. Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, we're just going to try to develop young talent this year. Not really
that part does suck. That there's no getting around that would be unfortunate. Now, having said that, if in the course of that, let's say they go 7-10, but they develop a clear identity on offense in terms of the running game and what they want to do passing wise, whether it's the right quarterback or not. And they have a defense where you sort of what I would love to see, obviously, is the defense becomes like a thing where the Browns are known now as a defensive team. Even if they don't make the playoffs and they're able to achieve those things, it will still suck that they are not in contention. But I think at that point, you can at least go, okay, now let's get the quarterback, let's get some more weapons, and let's really get this thing ramped up. Where now you're talking to yourself, if the quarterback gets right, or if it's the guy they draft or whatever is ready to step in, whatever it is, if they get the quarterback right and they keep adding weapons and all these other things, now you're talking about, okay, now it's time to make that big step forward. Now it's time to not just make the playoffs, because they will have had playoff experience on this team with Myles Garrett and some of these other things, but now it's time to go win a playoff game or something to that effect.
Yeah. I get that. You see, you're like, you want to create everything around it and then put the quarterback in at the end.
That's my dream. Now, can it get done? To be determined. But if let's put it this way, if I'm Jimmy Haslam and I'm going out making the comments that you're alluding to, I'm probably also saying, now you guys got to get these other things sorted out.
Yeah.
Now, again, that doesn't mean it necessarily comes at the cost of saying I'm going to fire you if you don't. But you're putting, in Jimmy Haslam's case, not that he can, one, easily afford it, and two, he's used to it, put his ass on the line for everybody else and basically say, I'm going out on a limb for you. Make this right for me, so I can defend this. So,
all right. I'll come back to this. Let's get through a couple more of these. So kind of the question next for Haslam was, so fans shouldn't necessarily get their hopes up that the Browns are drafting a QB at 2. We'll see, Haslam said. There are lots of different options. We're going to do what's best for the team. Does he believe that a surefire non-quarterback such as Hunter or Penn State defensive end Abdul Carter trumps a quarterback with question marks? I think that's fair to say, Haslam said. I mean, despite the fact that we haven't been very successful, we understand and value the quarterback position. We just haven't got it right, and that's the simple matter. So he's acknowledging they haven't got it right. Haslam admitted he doesn't know why Berry said he's unlikely to trade up to number 1 with the Titans to draft Cam Ward, who's gained steam as the clear-cut number 1 quarterback in this draft. I asked him the same thing. Haslam said, we had dinner together last night, and he just said, quote, I don't really see that happening.
Yeah, we know why.
Yeah, I guess. Three first rounds, but it shouldn't be that for the Browns. It should be a different price for them, right?
No, I mean, again, this is, you're the Titans.
There's value to being able to know you can still get your guy.
Yeah, I get it, but it's just, if you're the Titans, you're going, we love Cam Ward, and but hey, we think we're so far away that we're opening the door to you giving us the Godfather offer of 3 first-round picks, and then we'll let you have him. Like, yeah, if I'm the Browns, I would do the same thing. If somebody wants to give me 3 first-round picks for Cam Ward, fine. That's an insane ask, and they're not going to get it. But I totally understand it from the Titans standpoint. Cam Ward is a good quarterback prospect. He is not a, once in a lifetime, or, he would be well, but not crush it relative to last year's field. So I'm perfectly comfortable not paying that. Where I get sort of frustrated is this element of the all or nothing proposition of, if you don't get a quarterback, you're wasting your time on everything else. Abdul Carter would make this team better. Travis Hunter would make this team better. That's undeniable.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for a quarterback at 2.
Not you, but there are plenty of people trying to make this argument that are saying, if we don't get a quarterback at 2, what are we even doing? Why even show up? And that's insane because, and citing the whole, well, they went 3-14 with Myles Garrett. Deshaun Watson, when people loved him, went 4-12 when he threw for 4,800 yards and 33 touchdowns. Nobody's going to sit here and go, well, quarterbacking is a useless element because Deshaun Watson threw for 4,800 yards and 33 touchdowns and they won 4 games. It's an insane position to take and go, well, Myles Garrett's only worth 3 wins. It's stupid. Deshaun Watson last year and the quarterback position last year was worth so little, it was dragging everything else down so far. If they just eliminate that, the Browns are going to be better. How much better? To be determined. But like Abdul Carter makes this team immensely better. Abdul Carter is a terrifying defensive prospect. To put it a different way, if you are any other team in the AFC North, what scares you more? Travis Hunter lining up on the Browns offense, Abdul Carter lining up on the Browns defense, or Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart at 2? The answer has to be Carter or Hunter. Whatever, you can say how important those things are, but you're going to be honest about that and say, if you're the Bengals, Travis Hunter scares me more than Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart. You're going to say that Abdul Carter, the Browns may not win a whole lot of games, but I am not looking forward to going to Cleveland and having to deal with Myles Garrett and Abdul Carter. Like, we may win that game, but my quarterback might die. That is the difference between sort of just wish casting a quarterback at 2 and trying to play the board and being smart with it. Again, those players could outperform expectations. I like Jackson Dart quite a bit. I think Shedeur Sanders is a perfectly fine prospect. I just think they're second-round prospects. They should be taken relative to their value, or at least close to it. These 2 guys are players that can change the league.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I do think Cam Ward is an elite prospect, but that's besides the point. You can't get up there anyways. They're not coming off of him because they feel the same way, I think. So he did acknowledge Berry has to get it right this draft, with the Browns coming off an unbelievably disappointing year and having 10 picks to restock the roster. Quote, Andrew understands how important the draft is this year, he said. He's got to nail it, but he understands how important it is. Everybody in our organization does. He noted with 5 picks in the top 103, quote, the draft is huge for us, huge. Okay, we've got the second pick, the 33rd pick, the 67th pick, 93, and 103. So 5 of the top 103 picks, and we need to get good players for all the obvious reasons. We're excited about the draft, and we've got to get it right. And we've spent a lot of time working on it, and will continue to do so. He goes on to say, it's all very obvious, right? They got to get the draft right.
Yeah, it's a little bit more sense of an urgency, though, if you're saying that he's got to get right, because even though it sort of does sound like he's offering them more leash, it certainly sounds to me like there's pressure on this draft to be right, specifically with that number 2 pick.
Yeah, but then he goes on to say he stressed that he won't hold Berry and Stefanski unduly accountable for this season if the franchise quarterback isn't there. There's your pass. I don't think so, he said. We have high confidence. Andrew needs to do better. And in personnel, Kevin needs to do better at coaching. But we have high confidence in both those guys. And we really do. And I like both those guys. And I want them to be around. But have they justified a pass?
In terms of like they should get this again, as I've said all along,
season.
If they go out and this team is like 4-13 and there's no development, there's nothing that's gotten done this year, then no.
Okay.
But that's the thing. I don't view it as getting a pass. I think there are expectations. It's just the difference between what my expectations or maybe Jimmy Haslam's expectations versus yours might be different. But I think there has to be a clear direction for this team, because if nothing else, if they don't, they're almost going to force Jimmy Haslam's hand, because at that point you do get concerned about losing the locker room. You do get concerned about losing the confidence of your team at that point. And that's where I think the pressure is. In that sense, Jimmy Haslam doesn't have to say it, though he does. Saying you have to get the draft right is pressure, even if it's obvious. They need to get the draft right. Second pick in the draft is huge. 33rd pick in the draft is huge. Last year, their first pick was 54th. The year before, it was 60-something. They have to be able to capitalize on having these extra assets this year. But if they don't do some of the things that we're talking about that are going to give this team, a clear direction, a clear identity moving forward, a lot of the players Kevin Stefanski had been reliant on and Andrew Berry have been counting on will be gone. Joel Bitonio is going to retire. Wyatt Teller, who knows if he'll be here another year. Jack Conklin will be a free agent. Ethan Posick will be a free agent. Like, there will be a lot of these guys that, what is left is going to be Andrew Berry's players, but they may not be all that concerned with being Kevin Stefanski's players at that point. They may be new enough where you don't have, other than, and obviously Myles Garrett was not a draft pick of Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, and he's been here the whole tenure, but there aren't that many guys. Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett, but a lot of these guys are going to be second, third, fourth year guys or rookies with this upcoming class. Like, if they don't start making this thing into showing real impact, there's not enough buy-in and trust from the players who will still be here, because they won't have that. They won't have the playoff seasons, and they won't have the previous success where they can sit there and go, I know what Kevin Stefanski can do and all this other stuff. All they're going to have is potentially, the guys who are still here, 2023 was a great year, but it will feel like a magical year where 2024, and if they have a bad 2025 season, will feel more like reality. And I think at that point you start losing those guys, and then Jimmy Haslam sort of more or less forced to make a move. So that's where I look at this and go, whether Jimmy Haslam says it or not, and again, I think he is in some of this stuff, the players are going to put more pressure on Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry than anyone else.
I hope so, yeah. Haslam is on board with the Browns starting former Steelers first-round pick, Kenny Pickett. I feel good about it. We do, he said. He's had a winning record as a starter. He's took a team to the playoff. So his first year as a rookie, he looked really good. We're going to do everything we can to put him in a position to do well with us. We have not met Kenny yet, so we look forward to doing so in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, he's been working out with his QB coach. Was it Tony? It's either Tony or Tom. I know I follow him on Twitter, Risopi or whatever his name is. He's been working out with him, and I see those little hands and gloves getting after it. But look, I know from your standpoint, you go, oh, this sounds awful.
It does.
It's what he has to say. One, they traded for him. He better be feeling good about it. I want to feel good about my 5th-round pick that we threw away for this damn $2.5 million contract. But if you traded for the guy, you better feel good about him, because if you don't, why the hell did you acquire him anyway? You should have just kept DTR at that point. So they better feel good about him. That does not mean they should feel good about the quarterback room as a whole, and I don't think they do. But this was asked in a way that basically said, if Kenny Pickett has to play, how do you feel about it? Well,
yeah,
that's how he says about everybody. So that's fine.
Sure.
To me, I do not look at that. And I could ultimately regret this later. I do not look at that as Kevin Stefanski going, yep, we're rolling with Kenny Pickett into the season. I do not. But in the scenario, and unfortunately, given the Browns' history, all too often this has to happen where you're playing 3 and 4 quarterbacks in a year. He better feel good about the third string guy because they may see action at some point. Or in this case, the backup, more than likely, if that rookie is either not where, to me, I think that rookie would need to overachieve to get on the field ahead of Kenny Pickett. Or at least I would hope that would be the case, so that he becomes the true backup.
Yeah. I guess when they acquired him, I just assumed he would be like their third quarterback.
Well, I mean, if they draft let's say they draft Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart, they trade up and get one of those guys, and they hit the ground running, then maybe they do. Maybe they become the backup. But I want them to earn that. I want them to walk into the building and they are third string. Hell, Jackson Dart. One of the reasons I like him, not that this is a shot at Shedeur Sanders because it's not. I think he's an overachiever and a hard worker. Jackson Dart has won 2 different quarterback competitions at Ole Miss. He won as a sophomore. He won the job at a competition as a sophomore. Then Lane Kiffin brought in somebody else from the portal to try to beat out Jackson Dart, and Jackson Dart had to beat that guy again. What's really interesting about all these SEC schools is they've all released these video series of their quarterbacks and stuff that does sort of background on them. And he talked about, Jackson Dart talks about the fact he was openly pissed off that they recruited somebody to compete against him because he thought the job was his. And, he makes this whole big thing, as you'd expect. I didn't whine and cry about it. I went there and fought and won the job and all that other stuff. But it's sort of interesting that Jackson Dart, if nothing else, is used to this in terms of having to earn it. And I don't, if it's Shedeur Sanders, again, I think he's a hard worker. I think he's an overachiever. I don't think he's going to sit there and pout if he's the third string. And that's what I ultimately want. If it's Jalen Milroe should be practically fourth string based on where he is as a quarterback right now.
Yeah.
There should be like a wide receiver who might be the third string ahead of Jalen Milroe before he gets on the field as a real quarterback other than like a package player.
Yeah. Listen, you guys that like Kenny in the chat, I'm Kevin, Jeff, you guys like him a lot. That's great. I hope he's amazing. If they go to start him or he has to play this year, I hope he's amazing. I'm a Browns fan through and through, but just going off of,
he's the next Sam Darnold. This, you heard it here first. He's going to go into free agency and he's going to get $30 million and the Browns are going to get a sweet third round compensatory pick. It's going to be great.
Yeah. All right. That's pretty much all he did mention Flacco. He noted fan favorite Joe Flacco in the conversation as another veteran bridge. It doesn't mean we're going to do anything, but he's in the conversation, he said.
Yeah, that's about the extent of it at this point. We'll see. Again, of the options that are out there, he's certainly my preference in terms of getting a veteran. And especially if you want to take Travis Hunter, get Joe Flacco, because if nothing else, you got to throw the damn ball at him and let him go do things. That is the one big selling point for Joe Flacco is if you really want Travis Hunter, Joe Flacco will go get him the ball, along with Jerry Jeudy and the other guys. But we'll see. I mean, Joe Flacco just hanging out, getting older. So, yeah.
All right, let's go to the next video. This is courtesy of 92.3 The Fan. Then we'll get off this the Pickett stuff, but this is Ken Carmen and Anthony Lima.
As honest as he possibly could be when you're saying we don't need to force the quarterback. The owner said that. That's not a caller. That's not us rolling our eyes at a caller. That's the owner of the football team. So they may very well still force quarterback number 2. They might do that. Things get crazy. Owners always say a lot of things. But if he's saying that, then it makes me sound like, the season's going to be about developing guys, getting some young guys in, and kind of getting a breather. And going, why should we force a quarterback in a season that doesn't have a whole lot of great quarterbacks? And so Kenny Pickett takes over. I fear for Kevin Stefanski's job then and Andrew Berry's, but
of course
that's already been dealt. They got to deal with what they got to deal with. But I think they're looking at this saying this is enough of the craziness. We've dealt with crazy. We've created crazy. We can't do this anymore. So, you know what? Kenny Pickett is an also-ran that I've made fun of for a long time. But maybe he'll prove us wrong. Probably won't. but it looks like he'll probably start the season. I think Kirk Cousins is probably off the deck. A lot of other guys are off the deck.
Yeah, do you think they're
Wasn't that many to begin with?
I think you're right in how you evaluated what was being said
think
yesterday.
I'm right? Yeah.
I think you are right.
Because I think they could sit around and go, we don't need a quarterback this year.
Well,
Next year's a much better class.
I also
people are already giving me the Arch Manning stuff. I go, guys, I don't even know if he's going to come out next year. Let's take it 1 year at a time here before we start tanking out multiple years over here. I just got comfortable with the idea that they were going to take one. And I'll give you every reason in the world if I am convinced they're going to take one that I like Shedeur Sanders for this, and this reason. But if they're not going to take one, okay, then if you're willing to wait, I don't want to be waiting around forever because I don't think you're ever going to find the perfect prospect. I just don't think the odds are not in your favor to find the perfect prospect.
Well, it would have been just sweeter and simpler for him to say, Pete, you were right. You were right all along. I was wrong. Of course, they weren't going to take one of these quarterbacks and force it. But here we are. Look, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. The Browns are absolutely going to take a quarterback. And again, I hate this approach of if they don't take a quarterback. This is the thing. Like for a long time, is if you took a quarterback in the first round or even the first top 50, you're addressing the position. Now, it may not work, but that's true of even if you took him at 2. But like we've gotten to this point where like if the Browns take Travis Hunter, Abdul-Carter at 2, and they trade up at 20, and they get either Shedeur or Jackson Dart, like that, as if that's not a serious attempt. Like the first round is now not a serious attempt at taking a quarterback. Now it's different in terms of how long you are wedded to this prospect at 20 versus 2 or 33 versus 2. But we are now at this point where we have made this into this stupid proposition. It's completely unrealistic because you look around the league and that's not how these quarterbacks are drafted. And this is unfortunately like this weird mindset where we've gotten into, well, you have to take this quarterback in the top 5 or the top 2 or top, this tiny little fraction of the first round when that's not where the league is at in terms of where they got these quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson, 32nd overall. Josh Allen, 7th overall. Like Aaron Rodgers fell into the 20s. Like this is true over and over and over again. And even last year, obviously a historic class, but obviously the draft went deeper than 2. Drake May went 4th. Michael Penix, we'll see where he ends up, 8th. Bo Nix went 12th. And many people were saying Bo Nix was a second-round prospect, and he's proven them wrong to this point. We'll see where it goes. But, like, if this were the Browns last year and they didn't take, obviously we would have taken a quarterback if we were in this situation last year, but, like, this notion of, well, if we didn't get one of these top 2 guys that we weren't serious, it just doesn't prove out when you look at where these quarterbacks are ultimately picked. Like the funny part is like people, even people get in arguments and talk about the Eagles and they ignore the fact that Jalen Hurts was the 6th quarterback taken in this class and taken in the 2nd round. So if the Browns get a top prospect and let's put them, I'll call bullshit on all these people. If the Browns take Abdul-Carter or Travis Hunter at 2 and they come up and get a quarterback, especially if it's Shedeur Sanders, later in that first round, people will hail this as some great achievement. It will be like the moon landing. But I don't know why we do this, but that is a serious attempt at a quarterback. It's a first round pick. This is a town that gets mad. This is a town that gets mad about 3rd round picks. This is a team that the fan base that gets mad about 6th round picks that don't work out. So we're really going to sit here and go, well, if it's first round pick in the 20s, that's not really serious. They're barely even trying. Like this is insane.
Absolutely.
We absolutely overanalyze and overvalue draft picks. So we'll see. Like to this point, that's where but not to this point. Yeah, but the entire process is where I've been. They're going to take one of these big time players at 2. I still think it's going to be Abdul-Carter, but I'm happy with either one. Ultimately, I still have reservations with Travis Hunter relative to the whole doing multiple positions, but whatever. Yeah. But they're going to be aggressive, unless the worst case scenario plays out. Shedeur Sanders goes 3, Jackson Dart goes 9, Jalen Milroe goes 21 or something like that. Then, you got to own it and try to figure it out. And whether it's a Dylan Gabriel or somebody else, that's the worst case scenario. But I would still rather them do that than reach on a 2nd round quarterback or fringe first round, however you'd like to describe it, at 2. It's just a bad process overall.
100%. Yeah, like you can't. 100% not down for reaching on the quarterback at 2 by any stretch of the imagination. Is 100% bad process. And if you can come back up and get the guy in the end of the first round, it is a 100% a serious swing at it. I don't know why it wouldn't be. So it is. My fear, and once again, this doesn't have anything to do with who you take at the second pick. And I'll get off this because I'm irritating the chat. My fear is, Pete, and you've talked about this before, that they end up in this dangerous place in the NFL where you're just in the middle. And you're not competing really, and you're not bad enough to get
Just say
the
it.
guy.
You're worried they'll be the Steelers.
The Steelers.
Yeah, well, here's my argument with that is the Steelers have traded up once in the past however many years. And the time they traded up once was to trade up to pick a linebacker, not a quarterback, a linebacker. And now that linebacker is on the Browns. So the Steelers have had the power to change their fortunes, and they've chosen not to. If you're asking me, I don't want, I would like to have the Browns players, but I would like to have what amounts to be a 10-7 roster and be a quarterback away and say, hey, we're going to take our shot and trade up and go get a guy if we've got to, make that claim, or we're going to take multiple swings in the draft if it's a second round pick, or take one every year until we get it right. The Steelers don't do that. The Steelers have, this year is, they're verging on a revolt in their fan base the way they've handled this situation, to the point where they're already sick of Aaron Rodgers. He hasn't even signed yet. But like they've
the Browns haven't got it right in 40 years.
Right. So I would rather be in that situation and stake my claim and make the move and go up and get somebody, rather than the opposite, where now I'm bad and I get a quarterback who might work, but he might not, simply because the rest of the team is bad. I want, I will emulate as much as I can. I want to be the Bills when they got Josh Allen, winning record when they got him and they traded up. The Chiefs traded up from 27th pick to get Patrick Mahomes.
Do they have the ammunition to do something like that in a draft? Like, say there's 5 really good prospects next year and the Browns win 6 games. Will they have the ammunition to get up and get a guy that they love?
Yeah, why not? We are between what the Titans are asking for with Cam Ward and the Trey Lance deal, we have sort of gotten to this point where we are unrealistic, or a perception of being unrealistic with what trades actually cost. Like, the Chiefs did not give up. They gave up the first round pick the next year, but they didn't give up a huge amount to go and move up what was 17 spots to go get the quarterback. The Ravens gave up, obviously not very much, to move up to 32 for Lamar Jackson. The Bills gave up a first round pick for Josh Allen. Like, if you're giving a first round pick and change to move up and get the guy you want, there's always going to be somebody in a multiple quarterback field who's willing to move out of a pick. Is there a scenario where you can play out and you go, well, the top 3 teams all need a quarterback, and there's 3 quarterbacks, and they're all I'll be taken? Sure. But we just saw last year that if you have a good team, you can elevate your, what may not be a perfect, to Ken Carman's argument, what may not be a perfect prospect. But I want the Browns to be in a better position before they get the imperfect prospect to sort of elevate them, to sort of lift them up. I would argue Jalen Hurts was certainly not by no means a perfect prospect when the Eagles got him, but the Eagles are really good, so they've elevated him. The 49ers, Brock Purdy probably doesn't happen on a whole lot of teams and may not happen with a whole lot of other coaches. But the 49ers were a really good team with a really good offense, and they made it work. get the good team, create that identity, then go get it. Now, again, if the Browns were able to position to get Cam Ward, I would say take him. I don't love him. I like him quite a bit, but I would take him. We're not in that position. We're trying to talk ourselves into prospects that just simply aren't there. And that would be a more reasonable situation if the Browns were picking 15th and had a better team around them. So that's where I think they go. But to be the Steelers, the way they are, the Steelers at any point in time can put the flag in the ground, stake their claim, and they choose not to. That's on them. And maybe one of these years they will change that approach and get a quarterback again. Obviously, and look, they didn't do anything to get Ben Roethlisberger. They just got him. So that's the other part of this. But by all means, the Browns, if nothing else, they have a GM who's willing to go get their guy. They've proven that stupidly at times with Deshaun Watson, but they've obviously traded up, traded around, and not gotten completely destroyed in the process for any non-Deshaun Watson trade. For the most part, they've gotten pretty good value. So, all the more reason Andrew Berry needs to Jimmy Haslam's point, he needs to do really well in this draft. I'm hoping he sticks to the principles that were developed the last 2 years, and hopefully they hit the ball hard every at bat. They are able to get a bunch of hits out of that. And obviously the Browns do well. He keeps his job. And then when you are in a position where Kevin Stefanski goes, I like this guy, Andrew Berry is able to go up and get him, and then we go from there. As opposed to this year, where if you, obviously Kevin Stefanski did a bunch of, did the interview with local media. Did you hear him do the spot on Sirius Radio where you see his eyes light up talking about depth at quarterback in this draft? I'm just sort of like, wait a minute, what? To me, in some ways, it sort of gives away the game a little bit. And maybe I'm reading too much into that because it's ultimately what I think is gonna happen anyway.
He doesn't really give away physical stuff like that very often. You never really see him change his tune that much like he did in that. But he certainly acts like he loves this class or the guys that are deep in this class, in the quarterback class, right?
So I want the Browns to be better. One, I want Kevin Stefanski to prove again, and I think he's going to do this, that he's worth keeping his job. I hope Andrew Berry proves he's worth his job. And then in a better, I expect will be a better quarterback class. And no, I'm not. I will continue to say I'm not taking Arch Manning seriously until 2027. Stop it. He's thrown 95 college passes.
I know.
He if not for his last name, he would be a highly regarded recruit who has yet to play yet. But because his name is Manning, we suddenly think he's going to be tanked for Arch. It's unrealistic. But what I want is for Kevin Stefanski in a year where we feel really good about a guy and goes to Andrew Berry and goes, get me him. Andrew Berry does it, and we roll from there. Now, it's very easy for me to say that. They've actually got to go and do it. They've got to prove these things. But compared to what we're dealing with now, and maybe that is what's happening right now. Maybe that's what's going to happen when we get into if the board falls right on the first day of the draft. And Jackson Dart might be that guy. Shedeur Sanders might be that guy, but at a more reasonable value. We'll see. Which, by the way, that was the part that really struck me. Yes, he lit up. He also literally used the word value in talking about the quarterbacks when he was asked that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. I wonder who he really, really likes out of that group.
I've got my guess.
You think it's Dart, huh? But
I do. Now they may not get him, but
I can
I do think they really like Dart.
Do you think? I think they like Dart a lot too. He doesn't strike me as like a Stefanski guy as much. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Which is funny because it's funny for two reasons. One, it's funny because Chris Sims compared him to Kirk Cousins, which is a comp I understand in what he's trying to get at, even though I think it's an insane comp based on just watching Jackson Dart play.
Somebody called him a less athletic Kenny Pickett today.
That's crazy.
That's what I said.
He's bigger, stronger, and fast. I assume he's faster than Kenny Pickett.
He's super twitchy. I know that. I mean, you can see
That's
it.
the thing. I think he's not twitchy at all. I think he is a momentum runner. And
Dart?
when he gets the full speed, he's a load.
At least in the pocket, his reaction time to evade people, I feel like he's got some quick reaction. All right,
watch Jalen. Watch Jackson Dart run in the open field. He gets it going and runs people over.
Here is courtesy of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. The guys talking about why they think Milroe might be the secret guy.
Do you know the Mets? The Browns are.
I sense you're intrigued by Jalen Milroe.
I am. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I like. There's three things that he's really good at. He's got a good arm, a big time arm. He's a ridiculous athlete, and he's smart. Like that is a good basis to which to work from.
By the way, I think he's a better athlete than Justin Fields.
Right, he's more like Lamar than.
Yeah, he's more like I think that honestly you could use him as a running back.
I was about to say he more built than
Yes.
all of those guys.
What's his height and weight, Mike?
Milroe
6'2", 2 something.
6'1".
Yeah. I mean, what is Justin Fields? I mean, he's pretty thin.
Like 6'1", 1 or probably maybe 200.
Milroe's listed at 6'2", 225.
Yeah.
Okay.
Justin Fields
He's 200
He's like
pounds.
6'1".
He like
right?
is listed at 6'3", 230.
He ain't
Yeah, he's
6'3".
6'3".
6'3",
Yeah, he's 6'3".
He's not
No.
230.
I'm just-
but I think
Yeah.
No,
Don't
sorry.
look at me. I'm just
not
reading the
trying to kill the
ESPN
messenger.
profile.
Yeah.
He's
So you
6'3".
guys think Milroe's more put together?
I think he's more of a runner. Like I don't think that Justin Fields is looking to run. I think
Right.
I think he can run.
He had to
and he's
in
a
Chicago.
capable runner.
Yeah.
But Jalen Milroe, I believe, if you have him as your quarterback, is going to carry the football 15 times a game
I think
at least.
let's face it. Whenever there's a quarterback who's a great athlete now, your dream is that he can become Lamar Jackson. Now, Lamar Jackson, way more accomplished than Jalen Milroe coming out of college. Fair to say,
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
right? So,
Played a lot more.
and
I
even
mean, he won the Heisman.
right,
Yeah.
and even with that, Lamar was doubted by a lot of the football brethren to the point where he went 32nd when he should have gone either first or second in that draft.
It was the old school people, and
Yes.
it was mostly Bill Polian, let's be honest.
Yes,
but there were people
But he
that-
wasn't the only one. He was just most public about it.
Yeah, I would
And-
agree with you.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: the game's changed, man.
Oh, yeah.
If you've got a quarterback that is a capable thrower but also a dynamic runner,
Yeah.
dude. And Cosell talked about this, and Tyvus, from playing against quarterbacks like this, defensively, your coordinator's like he can't sleep
Yeah.
because of that guy. Like you never know. On every play, that guy could go the distance. He
Right.
could hand it off. He could throw it. He could run it himself. Like there's a million things the guy could do.
It just changes the way a defense
100%.
has to play you.
100%,
You know,
yeah.
I'll give you an example. When I was in Seattle, my rookie year, we played Carolina with Cam Newton.
Right.
And literally, they had us go over how to properly play like the read option because they do the read
Right,
and then
right,
they'll
sure.
pull it. So what happened is we ran predominantly cover 3. Well, now what you got to do is that offensive tackle, you got to slam down on the running back every time. That dude that's the buzz player, you got to sink in a little bit to be able to take that quarterback if he take off, and then you got that linebacker that's got to scrape over the top. All of this has to happen. Oh, by the way, if he play action, you're still responsible for your zones. So to me, it puts a lot of stress on other things that's going on the defense to where if it's just a regular quarterback that's not a runner, you don't have to
Right.
worry about those
Right.
things. Now, the guy has to be able to make the passes and all of those things, which is something
Right.
that Milroe has to clean up. But the craziest thing about it is the hardest ball to throw is his best ball, and it's the deep ball. He throws it very accurately, which makes no sense to me that
Let
he
me
can
ask
do
you guys
that.
a question on that,
weird.
Ty, because McShay had this on his podcast about Milroe.
Yeah.
They said Milroe is such a physical specimen. Like if you see him in the gym, he's the strongest dude in the weight room. They say he's too big, he's too jacked, and they suggested that he may need to stop lifting weights essentially to be able to put some touch on the throws. Because
They're saying that's affecting him negatively from a throwing standpoint?
I'm saying
Yeah.
this is what they said.
You guys
Because
buying that?
Is there any plus? Is that a real thing? Like, I had never heard someone say that
Should
about
a
a
quarterback be
before.
too jacked up?
I don't think
I don't
so.
know. I mean, like, we go back to Brady Quinn, right? And people were like, this guy's too yoked out. Man. He's doing these commercials. He couldn't throw. He couldn't no touch, all this stuff. I'm just trying to.
There's nothing to that, right? I mean, we saw Milroe at his pro day, and I know it's on air, but like, seems to be able to, his throwing motion looked fine and clean and everything. He's not too bulked up to where it's restricting your movement, I don't think.
Here again, I'm going to be in the middle. The notion that he's simply too strong gets to be silly. What McShay, I don't think, does a great job of sort of enunciating is the idea that you want to get your muscles longer and more flexible.
Sure.
So rather than focus on bulk, you want to focus on sort of lengthening those things and making yourself, again, improve flexibility, those type of elements to maximize your ability to throw, to touch, and all those other things. To your point, yes, he looked significantly better at pro day. A lot of that was his feet. His feet at Alabama were a train wreck for the most part. And if you watch it, you would see like he, especially if he's on the move, like his feet were always cattywampus when he was trying to throw the damn ball, in terms of like they were never right when he was throwing it, and it was always like either off a weird angle or whatever.
Yeah,
and he wasn't sort of accustomed to like just throw, just sort of trusting that his lower body was going and just throwing it. So it was always off balance. He's put in a significant amount of work to try to improve his footwork. Now, does that mean there isn't more work to do on the upper body and all that other stuff? He's got a lot of work to do. In a lot of ways, he is Justin Fields.
Yeah.
Now, Justin Fields was a significantly more accurate quarterback coming out of Ohio State, and he was somebody I thought was going to be great coming out of Ohio State. I thought he had it all going on for him, and then he basically went to Chicago, and it's almost like, I don't want to say he regressed, but he sort of transformed into like just a runner. Whereas at Ohio State, and obviously this is where I sort of get worried about Will Howard, you throw to a lot of really good receivers, they can make you look better than maybe you really are. But regardless, if you're the Browns and you really like Jalen Milroe and you get him, you're basically saying, we want to take Justin Fields at 21, 22 years old and take our time with him and develop him in a way that the Bears were never going to be able to do with Justin Fields. If you're getting him at 33, for example, and you've got a real quarterback room, you don't need to rush Milroe out in the field. When you took Justin Fields 11th, there was an expectation that he had to be on the field pretty soon. And that probably did him no favors, as the Bears didn't do him many favors in general. And then he became sort of this just constantly running and relying on his legs, which you still saw with the Pittsburgh Steelers. When everything went wrong, he just ran around. So, I think Jalen Milroe needs a significant amount of time. And what that entails is, it's great when you are in a climate-controlled building on air. You can well, yeah, that's true, but whatever. They need to take a whole lot of time to, you can get the mechanics right rehearsed. Tim Tebow could get the mechanics right rehearsed.
Sure.
What you have to be able to do is to spend, the 10,000 reps and all of this other stuff to the point where it becomes innate.
It
becomes second nature. So when you are under pressure, you don't just revert back, which is what always happened with Tebow. He would look great. Let me preface, not great. He would look like a quarterback when, he could sort of think it out and do it, as opposed to just reacting. And that's where I think Jalen Milroe really needs 2 full years to really get that stuff right. In addition to some of the other stuff he's got to get right. He's got to do a better job reading defenses. He's got to do a better job. And the other thing I would point out with all of these guys in the Jalen Milroe camp, and I said this about CJ Stroud, and I proved to be loud wrong initially. Guys who are that athletic the learning curve is even longer than, say, a pure pocket quarterback. And you sit there and go, why? Because, they have so many more answers. They also have so many more things they have to learn to use. In other words, when should I use my legs? When do I, need to be able to throw on the run effectively? When do I need to win from the pocket? If you don't take that time, and that could be a long process, you then start, your immediate reaction might be, I'm always going to trust my legs too much. I'm always going to try to scoot out of the pocket and try to make a play with my legs, as opposed to, no, this is a situation where I should hang in there, get the ball out and go. Or if I'm rolling out, in high school and in college, well, I was the most athletic guy in the field. I could stick my foot in the ground and beat everybody else down the field. The NFL, you're going to have an advantage over some guys, but hey, Abdul Carter is going to be in the league. Myles Garrett's going to be in the league. You're going to have, these are guys that can run faster than you. And when they get there, it's going to hurt. You're going to have to learn how to use all of these tools correctly. And that takes time. And you watch the evolution of Lamar Jackson, who is a multiple-time MVP, and you can still, and there are times where it's still trying to figure out, because he's so talented. He has so many tools at his disposal. Knowing what tool to use at the right time can lead to some poor choices. Now, on the other hand, when Lamar Jackson gets it right, he's indefensible. Yeah. Jaden Daniels, as a rookie, was spectacular at points because he was just indefensible. And that's sort of the upside. But it does to me, and Jaden Daniels played a ton of football in college. That is where I think you need a significant amount of time with developing those guys. Whereas somebody else who, like a pure pocket guy, just has to win from the pocket because he knows his legs aren't worth a shit. So he's got to win from here every time. So it really focuses you.
The thing about Milroe that I think that is most intriguing for me, and maybe could cut down on and I agree with you as far as when you look at him, he looks raw to the point of you'd need 2 years, right? But I think the person, his intelligence, his work ethic is, by all accounts, is A+++ human being. And I would feel good about betting on that working out.
Yeah. So one of the things that has been sort of brought up with Milroe is sort of like, well, why wasn't this stuff fixed in college? Well, Jalen Milroe, who won the Campbell Award, which is awarded to the premier academic, the academic athlete in college football, was getting his bachelor's and then bachelor's in business administration, and then got a master's. So when he was getting criticized for not staying in school, and I understand why people wanted him to stay in school and keep playing, Jalen Milroe had played school as far as it was going to go. Yeah. He had crushed it in the academic field. So if you are taking him and you're going, well, why didn't he fix all this stuff? One, he didn't have the private coaching that he's getting now, and two, he was doing school stuff. So if you are talking yourself into Jalen Milroe and you're sitting there, man, we love this kid, and that is the assessment. People love him. You're basically saying we're going to get a guy who then is hopefully going to take all the energy he was pouring into getting all these degrees and stuff, to then, if he pours all of that into getting better at football, then we feel like it's going to really speed up his developmental curve, and we're going to get where we want to go, in addition to getting a leader and a charismatic figure that's going to help us in the locker room and ultimately lift our team. And that part isn't, as long as he, as long as he's a passionate for the game, this is the whole thing where you go back to like Myles Garrett and Joe Thomas, people getting mad at them for having other interests. I have no problem with it. I'm all for it, because if they then pour all that energy into being great at football, you could end up being a really good player. Now, there is a risk, obviously, with Milroe that he's never going to get to where you need him to get to, but I totally understand why people would want to bet on that and see where it works out. Again, especially if you get him the 33rd pick, because then you can go into next year's draft and still take a quarterback, and then you have these two guys, hopefully that you feel great about, and one, if not both of them, hopefully work out, and then you're in a really good spot in the position where the Browns haven't been ever, which is not just one good quarterback, but potentially two good quarterbacks, and they can figure out what they want to do from there.
At what point, if you take a guy like Milroe and he's coming along, he's progressing, whatever the rest of the team is doing, at what point do you change what you are offensively to fit him? Because you kind of have to, right? Like,
Yes.
because he runs the way he is and he is the athlete he is, you're going to have to put the right pieces around him and change the offense. They're not going to be in that kind of offense this year. However, if you drafted him, like, at what point do you pivot to that? When are you like, he's good enough, we're going to commit to him, we have to change what we do here? And that will include some personnel change.
Personnel change, maybe not. But you've had to have thought this through before the card went in.
Yeah.
Like, Andrew Berry has to go to Kevin Stefanski and goes, what would this look like? In 2 years.
And
or
when?
whatever. Yeah. And when, obviously. But, like, you have to have some thought of where this is going to end up before you take him, because you now have to sort of put him on a path to get there. And yes, you do. I mean, there is a player, potential for player change. Like, the Ravens obviously deserve a ton of credit for what they were willing to do to commit with Lamar Jackson and make that work. I would hope that the Browns don't get in a situation where they are running, 3 tight ends and feel compelled to do it that way. But if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. But nevertheless, I would hope that in this discussion, whether it's with Andrew Berry or Jimmy Haslam or whatever, that Kevin Stefanski and Tommy Rees in that scenario would have put forth a vision of where this thing's going to go. How much of that is it's in line with what we're already doing versus how much of this is a real change, and where do you start to do that? And are you starting to sort of, are you sitting there going, this is what we're going to be for this year, but starting that next year, we're going to start sort of installing not even 2 offenses, but sort of an offense that sort of allows us to go into 2 different paths.
Yeah.
Whereas our running game sort of, it dovetails with what Jalen Milroe is ultimately going to do for us. And then the passing game, it's a little bit easier to sort of change that up because it's just routes, and then reps. But, like, it really more about the running game and your blocking scheme ultimately that's going to be more of the important part with that. So yeah, that's before the card goes in. And then as you get him, you're sitting there sort of working this out as you go. And then it becomes based on his development. He may be, I would be hard pressed given what Kevin Stefanski has done with DTR. If he's going to do it with him, certainly he's going to do it with Milroe, where he has package plays, where he's going to use Milroe in something. You're going to start to introduce that and then slowly morph into whatever that's going to be.
To finish up tonight, any thoughts on the rule changes?
Oh, yeah. The overtime rule, stupid. Keep it.
Why?
They should keep it sudden death.
Why?
The last thing the NFL regular season needs is more snaps.
Longer games. Yeah.
Longer games. It's a 10-minute quarter. Like, what are we doing here? Like, if you take a long extended drive and you score, and then you got to go out there again, and I get what the NFL loves it, because they took 7 minutes off the clock, and now the other team gets the ball back, and now they get to try to go down the field, and it's like, I hate it from the standpoint, one, I think it diminishes the importance of defense. I think we think of the game too much from an offensive point of view. The defense doesn't matter. That it's absolutely insane to potentially kick the ball in overtime or something to that, or whatever. I want defense to be more important. Like, if you can get, if you get the ball and you start with and you go and score, you win. Defense has to stop them. And all the more reason for the Browns to get Abdul Carter is to hopefully do these things. But they don't need more snaps. Like, what was it a couple years ago where the Browns had a bunch of overtime games, and you're sitting there and you're starting to think in your head, like, they're adding all these extra snaps over the course of the season.
Yeah.
And they've already admitted after Roger Goodell insisted, what are you talking about 18 games? There's never going to be a conversation about 18 games. Oh, by the way, next week we're talking about adding an 18th game.
Yeah.
Like, at some point, you are just adding more football. And just getting to a point where it's just stupid. And given the amount of injuries the Browns have suffered the last 2 years, enough. And I can't take any, I've seen enough end of season garbage football for a lifetime. So I don't like the OT rule. It's fine for the playoffs. I totally understand for the playoffs. I still don't love it, but I get it.
Well, in the playoffs, ultimately, there cannot be a tie. However, unless they change that part of the rule too, and I missed it. But at the end of that 10 minutes, if both teams can score a touchdown, or if they score a touchdown and you are guaranteed the ball back, I think this ends up with more ties.
It does. Which, again, like, is that or are we trying to soccerize football in this scenario?
That's stupid. Yeah.
And I got nothing against soccer, but like, that's one of the things that sort of separates football, is there aren't that many ties. It does make more ties. Tush push. They tabled it. Ultimately, I think it's an aesthetically unpleasing play to watch. I think it's not fun to watch. I don't like watching it, but I also have a hard time sort of justify banning it. I think the best argument you have, the Dallas Cowboys sort of presented one interesting counter argument, which is that linebackers can't push defensive linemen on a field goal or something like that, which is true. And then the other thing that's sort of interesting to me is I think the NFL got spooked by Chris Jones in the Super Bowl trying to throw his body at it and hurting his neck. Not that I think that somebody's going to end up paralyzed doing it, but the NFL, I don't think the NFL wants to lose a superstar player trying to stop this, what a lot of people would sort of dismiss as a stupid play.
You also had that scene where it got ridiculous. What game was that? Where they just kept jumping off sides over and over because they couldn't get any closer to the goal line.
Yeah.
Just to stop it. And it was just offside. They had to warn them that if they jumped offsides again, it was going to be an automatic touchdown. Was that the Detroit game?
Yeah. I'm fine with banning it when everybody else has mastered it, or at least one other team has mastered it. That's the other part. I can't punish the Philadelphia Eagles because they figured out something nobody else could do. If there were 3 teams doing this, then ban it. Like, that's where I sit there and go, I can't punish the Eagles for being good. Because if everybody could do it, they would, and they don't. The expanded replay, love it. You want to tell me about how much more time it's going to add? I'm telling you, replay assist is so much faster.
Yeah.
And it's going to make things
get it right.
Yes. The fact that touchbacks are moving it back to are now going to be the 35-yard line was entirely predictable.
Yep.
I mean, as somebody who has to watch the Browns, I don't like it because the Browns haven't been great on it.
Just do away with the kickoff. Come on, man.
That's where I ultimately get to. Now, there are people who absolutely love this thing. I got to a point where it didn't take very long where I was sort of over it. So, yes, they're going to return more of them. The Browns signed DeAndre Carter to hopefully help them on this. Who was very good at it, to his credit. Hopefully Fred does not see him tear something right in front of his eyes, since that's seemingly happened to him for every kick returner the Browns have signed in the last couple of years.
Why can't the Browns find a guy that's already on their roster to do this stuff? I hate that they still sign a specialist like this. Like you should be like somebody that's on your 50. It's the NFL. Somebody on your 53 should be able to do DeAndre Carter's job. Come on, man. He's not a good enough wide receiver to earn a spot. Then he shouldn't be on the team.
Yeah, more than likely the Browns would have in the draft if they pick a couple running backs. But yeah, it is what it is, and it's an important. The Browns rightly anticipated this was where it was going to go. So the field position thing being important. If he can do both jobs, great. Then that eliminates it as one more thing. And if he's on the roster, then I don't have to listen to anybody crying about James Prochet being poached. So that part is more or less dealt with. And what else? Is that all of them for the rules that got changed?
Just the electronic chain gang.
Yeah, I'm all for it. It's just a question of making sure it's right. Having the chain gang being a backup makes sense. It's faster. Relying on humans to do the little old men running around with chains makes sense in high school. It does not make sense in the NFL with all the money they have. Again, if you actually have to go out and measure, that I presume would take far longer than this electronic technology would do it. I don't want to see a ref take out a note card. I don't want to see any other nonsense.
Mm-mm.
Like, let's get this right and be done with it.
And I guess the technology was in place this year, so they've already used it. They tested it all year and got the go ahead on it. So,
yeah, I mean, they smartly tested this out for a year, which is what you want to do. And inevitably, when baseball does this, they will have the same sort of significant amount of research ahead of time. But it's time. The officials have enough to do. It's bad enough that we have to watch the sad little referee waddle around trying to place the ball while teams go fast. This is one less thing they need to have to do.
Yeah, I wonder. The crazy thing though is there's still going to be bad spots and stuff, like because it's not like they can be like, oh well. I mean, I guess they can use the replay assist to adjust the spot because there is a sensor in the ball as well, right? So,
yep. Chipped.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's just I mean, how many times, even in that Super Bowl game, that's one guy with the spot wasn't even close to the other guy coming in from the other side. It's just such an inexact way they do it. I wonder how they clean that up.
Antiquated and quaint at this point that we're relying on human eyeballs to line these things up.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for participating in the React tonight. Appreciate you being here. Hit like and subscribe on your way in or out.
There's one more thing we missed. The tampering period. The tampering period changes are actually really good. I don't know why this wasn't a thing. You're now allowed, the Steelers proposed this, and I don't know why this wasn't a real thing already. Before, you weren't allowed to talk to the player. You could only talk to the agent. So now teams can video conference with prospective free agents during the legal tampering period, which is the most common sense change ever.
Yeah, yeah. And while they're at it, they should have just changed it from the name because it's the worst name of anything ever. The legal tampering period is so stupid. Just call it.
The legal tampering period is the scouting combine. Like straight up, that is when that happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with that as well. But yes, this was a completely reasonable thing that shouldn't have taken this long.
Stick around for Garage Beers next with the great Bo Bishop on the show, joining the guys tonight. I think I saw that. So hang around for that. Of Cleveland Browns Daily, and enjoy him with the gentleman on Garage Beers. Any parting words, Pete?
Yeah, I hope Bo Bishop is ready on Garage Beers to embrace Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter and whatever overlord that the Browns decide to take it to, even though I know that's not where his preference is. hopefully we can all wrap
Nah.
our arms around whatever quarterback they trade up for to go get later in the first.
If of all of the common sense that was given to you by Pete about taking the best player available at 2, if you would like to hear the opposite side of that and taking the quarterback, hang around for Garage Beers next as Bo Bishop is on. Thanks for watching OBR streaming network. Hit like and subscribe. Tell a friend. Have a wonderful night and get your beers and head to your garage. Have a wonderful evening.